Okay, so good morning. This is going to be the Crucible Act 1, Part 2. Again, this reading is for my students, not intended for any other purpose other than to help you guys in reading. So my students, if you are in this book, okay, the one with the black cover, the fat book, we're going to start on page 19 where it says, Enter John Proctor. Okay, this is right after Abigail just basically threatened everybody about talking about what happened in the forest. If you are in this book, it is on page 20, again, straight in the middle of the page where it says Enter John Proctor, so we're a little bit off. This book is the same book as the books that have the blue and white cover as well. I know a lot of you have those. So the skinny book, it's on page 20. In the fat book, it's on page 19. So I'm going to give you a minute to find your place where it says Enter John Proctor. I'm kind of staying home today, a little bit of a cold, so bear with me if you hear me sniffling. And since we are in the Crucible and it's about witchcraft, I got my little fireplace in the background here. Kind of redecorated this weekend, so there you go, even though it's backwards. All right, so my students, you are annotating for characterization, and you're going to see a whole lot of characterization here with John Proctor, okay? Remember, we have kind of got this feeling that John Proctor may have had something to do with Abigail. Remember, Abigail was a servant in the Proctor's house, we learned, which meant she worked for them, she got paid for them, but we figured out that she was dismissed or fired. And we've learned that in that whole time, 7 months, no family has wanted to hire her. Okay, and so we did talk about diction and how Arthur Miller was showing us that something was going on with Abigail and her reputation. Remember, she says, there be no blush about my name. But we know that something else is going on. Okay, so right in the middle of the page, okay, it says, Enter John Proctor. And on seeing him, Mary Warren leaps in fright. Okay, so you should have boxed John Proctor's name. And now here we go with the characterization. There's a space. So now this is commentary, again, from Arthur Miller. It says, Proctor was a farmer in his middle 30s. He need not have been a partisan, or like on a side of any faction in the town. Remember, there's like two groups, the farmers and then the merchants, the people who supported Paris and Putnam and the people who were not really that supportive of him. Okay, so it says he need not have been a partisan of any faction in the town, but there is evidence to suggest he had a sharp and biting way with hypocrites. Does not like hypocrites at all. Remember, a hypocrite is someone who says one thing but does another. He was the kind of man, powerful of body, so he's swole, even-tempered, and not easily led. Somebody who can't be fooled, so he's not a follower. Who cannot refuse support to partisans without drawing their deepest resentment. In Proctor's presence, a fool felt his foolishness instantly, and a Proctor is always marked for calumny, therefore, aka people, because he kind of like would put them on blast and call them out. A lot of people spread rumors about Proctor. That's the whole calumny thing. Next paragraph says, but as we shall see, the steady manner he displays does not spring from an untroubled soul. He is a sinner not only against the moral fashion of the time, but against his own vision of decent conduct. So he really thinks himself that he has done something wrong. These people, the Puritans, had no ritual for the washing away of sins. So like Catholics, you would go to church and go to confession, and then you would be absolved of your sins, and you'd feel better. Puritans didn't have that. It says, it is another trait we inherited from them, and it has helped to discipline us as well as to breed hypocrisy among us. Proctor, respected and even feared in Salem, more characterization here, has come to regard himself as a kind of fraud or a fake. But no hint of this has yet appeared on the surface, and as he enters from the crowded parlor below, it is a man in his prime we see, with a quiet confidence and an unexpressed hidden force. Mary Warren, his servant, can barely speak for embarrassment and fear. So this is kind of important to note as well, okay? Watch how the others react when he enters the room, okay? So she is embarrassed, and she says, "Oh, I'm just going home, Master Proctor." "Be you foolish, Mary Warren? Be you deaf? I forbid you leave the house, did I not? Why shall I pay you? I am looking for you more often than my cows. I only come to see the great doings of the world. I'll show you a great doing on your arse one of these days. Now get you home. My wife is waiting with your work." And then says, trying to retain a shred of dignity because she's super embarrassed, she goes out slowly. Now Mercy Lewis, both afraid of him and strangely titillated, right? There's our vocab word, titillated, okay? Says, "I'd best be off. I have my Ruth to watch. Good morning, Mr. Proctor." Mercy sidles out. Pay attention to this part. More characterization here. Since Proctor's entrance, Abigail has stood as though on tiptoe, absorbing his presence, wide-eyed. He glances at her, then goes to Betty on the bed. "God, I almost forgot how strong you are, John Proctor." Looking down at Abigail now, he says with the faintest suggestion of a knowing smile, "What's this mischief here?" "Oh, she's only gone silly somehow," right? Like, she's gone silly. She's faking it. Proctor then says, "The road past my house is a pilgrimage to Salem all morning." That means lots of people from the countryside are coming into town to kind of see what's going on. Abigail says, So Proctor says, "The road past my house is a pilgrimage to Salem all morning." The town's mumbling, "Witchcraft." "Oh, posh. We were dancing in the woods last night, and my uncle leaped in on us. She took fright is all." Proctor, his smile widening, says, "You're wicked yet, aren't you?" A trill of expectant laughter escapes her, and she dares come closer, feverishly looking into his eyes. And he says, "You'll be clapped in the stocks before you're 20. Okay, the stocks were like this punishment, basically, for people. Remember, the Puritans punished people when they thought they were sinning. And so people who did something wrong, part of their punishment would be to be in the stocks, okay? Clapped. So if you think of it like this, the stocks were like this. They opened up this way, right? And then people would put their head and their arms through it, and then they would close them in like this. So that's what he's saying. You'll be clapped in the stocks before you're 20, okay? Kind of like arrested, but, or charged or punished, okay? Okay, and of course, Abigail, is like laughing at this, okay? But now look what happens. It says, he takes a step to go, and she springs back into his path. "Give me a word, John, a soft word." Says her concentrated desire, so we know that she has a thing for him, destroys his smile. No, Abby, that's done with. You've come 5 miles to see a silly girl fly? I know you better. Proctor, though, says, "I come to see what mischief your uncle's brewing now." Put it out of mind, Abby. So she grasps his hand before he can release her. "John, I am waiting for you every night." "Abby, I never give you hope to wait for me." She's starting to get angry. It says beginning to anger, and she can't believe it. She says, "I have something better than hope, I think. Abby, you'll put it out of mind. I'll not be coming for you more. You're surely sporting with me. You know me better. I know how you clutched my back behind your house and sweated like a stallion whenever I come near. Or did I dream that? It's she who put me out. You cannot pretend it were you. I saw your face when she put me out, and you loved me then and you do now. Abby, that's a wild thing to say. A wild thing may say wild things, but not so wild, I think. I've seen you since she put me out. I've seen you nights. I have hardly stepped off my farm this 7 months. But I have a sense for heat, John, and yours has drawn me to my window, and I've seen you looking up, burning in your loneliness. Do you tell me you've never looked up at my window?" "I may have looked up." "And you must. You are no wintry man. I know you, John." It says, "I know you." And it says she's weeping. She says, "I cannot sleep for dreaming. I cannot dream, but I wake and walk about the house as though I'd find you coming through some door." So she clutches him desperately now, and he kind of is trying to push her off. He says, gently pressing her for him with great sympathy, but firmly, he says, "Child." She says, "How do you call me child?" "Abby, I may think of you softly from time to time, but I will cut off my hand before I'll ever reach for you again. Wipe it out of mind. We never touched, Abby. Aye, but we did. Aye, but we did not. Ha! Oh, I marvel how such a strong man may let such a sickly wife be. You'll speak nothing of Elizabeth. She is blackening my name in the village. She is telling lies about me. She is a cold, sniveling woman, and you bend to her. Let her turn you like do you look for a whipping? I look for John Proctor, that took me from my sleep and put knowledge in my heart. I never knew what pretense, right? What lies and pretending or hypocrisy Salem was. I never knew the lying lessons I was taught by all these Christian women and their covenanted men, and now you bid me tear the light out of my eyes? I will not. I cannot. You loved me, John Proctor, and whatever sin it is, you love me yet. He turns abruptly to go out, and she wrestles him. John, pity me, pity me. Okay, so back up a minute. We've been talking a little bit about motifs, right? A motif is any type of recurring element, a color, a temperature, a symbol, names, okay? Seasons, weather. All these are motifs, okay? And motifs are things that repeat themselves or recur over and over in a piece of literature that help you understand a bigger message or a bigger theme, okay? So again, think of this like little tiny puzzle pieces that Arthur Miller is putting out there for us, the reader, to put together to understand something bigger, all right? So here we have two different motifs, okay? So I have to flip the page backwards to talk about this, but there's something here. She talks about wild. She talks about sweating like a stallion, okay? So if you go back, in the Fat Book, it's on page 21. But if you go back, she says, I know how you clutched my back behind your house and sweated like a stallion, okay? So we've got two things here. One of them, the stallion is a horse. So we're talking about animal imagery. And we talk about being wild, okay? Like wild horses, like this wild passion that you can't control. And so we have all this like animal imagery, okay? Obviously talking about sex, okay? So we know right now that something did happen with Abby and John, okay? And we also have this thing with temperatures, okay? She talks about heat. I have a sense for heat. She uses the word burning and your loneliness, okay? So we've got an animal motif and we have a temperature motif, okay? So both of those I would annotate. So when you see her talk about stallion and use the word wild, okay, that is an animal motif. And when you hear her talk about I have a sense for heat and all that stuff, that would be a temperature motif, okay? And so he's like, listen, we might have had something, but it's over. You need to wipe it out of mind. Forget about it, okay? And she's like, oh, no, okay? So this is on the top of 23 on the big book. And in the other book, it's probably 24, okay? Yeah, okay. So on 24, we're going to start at the part where it says 24 in this book or the skinny book. It's the words going up to Jesus are heard, right? Kind of in the middle of the page on 24. In the fat book, it's at the very, very top, the first line on page 23, okay? So we're having some stage directions. It says the words going up to Jesus are heard in the Psalms. So they're singing downstairs. And Betty then clasps her ears suddenly and whines loudly. And Abby goes, oh, Betty! She hurries to Betty, who is now sitting up and screaming, right? So remember, Betty, who was in the coma, is now sitting up and screaming like that. So Abby says, Betty! Okay, Betty! Proctor says, what's she doing? Girl, what ails you? Stop that wailing. The singing has stopped in the midst of this, and now Paris rushes in. What happened? What are you doing to her? Betty! He rushes to the bed, crying, Betty, Betty! And Mrs. Putnam enters, feverish with curiosity. And with her, Thomas Putnam and Mercy Lewis at the bed, keeps lightly slapping Betty's face while she moans and tries to get up. She heard you singing, and suddenly she's up and screaming. Mrs. Putnam, the psalm, she cannot bear to hear the Lord's name. No, God forbid. Mercy, run to the doctor, tell him what's happened here. Mr. Putnam says, mark it for a sign, mark it. New character now. Rebecca Nurse, a box around her name, 72, enters. She is white-haired, leaning upon her walking stick. Putnam points to Betty. This is a notorious sign of witchcraft afoot, goody nurse. A prodigious sign. Okay, prodigious is one of our vocab words. It means super strong or like almost unusual. Mrs. Putnam says, my mother told me that. When they cannot bear to hear the... Paris says, Rebecca, go to her. We're lost. She suddenly cannot bear to hear the Lord's. Giles Corey, new character, 83, enters. He is knotted with muscle, canny, inquisitive, and still powerful. Old guy, still pretty powerful. Top of 24 now in the fat book. There is a hard sickness, Giles Corey, so please to keep the quiet, Rebecca Nurse says. I've not said a word. No one here can testify I've said a word. Is she going to fly again? I hear she flies. Man, be quiet now. Everything is quiet. Rebecca walks across the room to the bed. Gentleness exudes from her, so there's a characteristic I would probably write down. Betty is quietly whimpering, eyes shut. Rebecca simply stands over the child, who gradually quiets. And here comes our little Arthur Miller again now to give us some commentary and says, now, and while they are still absorbed, we may put in a word for Rebecca. More characterization here. Rebecca was the wife of Francis Nurse, who from all accounts was one of those men for whom both sides of the argument had to have respect. The argument as the whole Salem witch trials. He was called upon to arbitrate, there's one of your words, right? To determine or decide. He was called upon to arbitrate disputes as though he were an unofficial judge. So that's how much respect dude had. And Rebecca also enjoyed the high opinion most people had for him. By the time of the delusion, the Salem witch the trials, they had 300 acres. So it's a lot of land. And their children were settled in separate homesteads within the same estate. However, Francis had originally rented the land, and one theory has it that as he gradually paid for it and raised his social status, there were those that resented his rise, aka those who were jealous. Another suggestion to explain the systematic campaign against Rebecca, and inferentially against Francis, is the land war he fought with his neighbors, one of whom was the Putnam. This squabble, or argument, grew to the proportions of a battle in the woods between partisans of both sides, and it is said to have lasted for 2 days. As for Rebecca herself, this is a good character quote to underline for characterization here. As for Rebecca herself, the general opinion of her character was so high that to explain how anyone dared cried her out for a witch, or accused her of being a witch, and more, how adults could bring themselves to lay hands on her, we must look to the fields and boundaries of that time. So now we're talking about land again, okay? As we have seen, Thomas Putnam's man for the Salem ministry was Bailey. The Nurse clan, or the Nurse family, have been in the faction that prevented Bailey's taking office. In addition, certain families allied to the Nurses by blood or friendship, and whose farms were contiguous, all right, which basically means like directly across from, with the Nurse farm, or close to it, combined to break away from the Salem town authority and to set up Topsfield, a new and independent entity whose existence was resented by old Salemites. AKA, we're just talking about, again, this break of people who live out in the country. Okay, so all the people that live in this part of the land are thinking, let's break away and make a new community, okay, because we're having so many problems with the people in Salem. That the guiding hand behind the outcry was Putnam's is indicated by the fact that as soon as it began, this Topsfield Nurse faction absented themselves from church in protest and disbelief. It was Edward and Jonathan Putnam who signed the first complaint against Rebecca, and Thomas Putnam's little daughter, Ruth, was the one who fell into a fit at the hearing and pointed to Rebecca as her attacker. To top it all, Mrs. Putnam, who is now staring at the bewitched child on the bed, soon accused Rebecca's spirit of tempting her to iniquity. Remember, iniquity is wickedness or evil sin, a charge that had more truth in it than Mrs. Putnam could know. Okay, so he's just giving us background about why Rebecca Nurse and Francis Nurse were accused of being witches. Basically because the Putnams and the people that were on their side and had issues with land boundaries were pretty much jealous of them. So now it says Mrs. Putnam is astonished as Rebecca just comes and stands over Betty, and then all this crying and whimpering stops, okay? So Mrs. Putnam, astonished, "What have you done?" Rebecca, in thought, now leaves the bedside and sits. Paris. What do you make of it, Rebecca? Putnam. Goody nurse, will you go to my Ruth and see if you can wake her? I think she'll wake in time. Pray, which means please, pray calm yourselves. I have 11 children, and I am 26 times a grandma, and I have seen them all through their silly seasons. And when it come on them, they will run the devil bow-legged, keeping up with their mischief. I think she'll wake when she tires of it. A child's spirit is like a child. You can never catch it by running after it. You must stand still, and for love, it will soon come back itself. So she's basically saying, well, we'll keep going. Proctor says, aye, that's the truth of it, Rebecca. These kids are just being stupid kids. Mrs. Putnam says, oh, this is no silly season, Rebecca. My Ruth is bewildered. Rebecca, she cannot eat. Perhaps she is not hungered yet. I hope you are not decided to go in search of loose spirits, Mr. Paris. I've heard promise of that outside. So basically, Rebecca is saying that these kids are just fooling around. They're not eating, but as soon as she gets hungry, believe me, she's going to eat, right? They're just playing. She'll wake, all right, when she gets tired of it. Now, Paris, though, this is the top of page 26 on the fat book. And on the other book, it is page 27, okay? The skinny book, page 27. Okay. Mr. Paris is going to say a wide opinions running in the parish. So either 27 or 26. Mr. Paris says, oh, wide opinions running in the parish that the devil may be among us, and I would satisfy them that they are wrong. Then let you come out and call them wrong. Did you consult the wardens, or the people who live in the, like the people who vote, like the town council? Did you consult the wardens before you called this minister to look for devils? He's not coming to look for devils. Then what's he coming for? There be children dying in the village, mister. I see none dying. This society will not be a bag to swing around your head, Mr. Putnam. Did you call a meeting before you? I am sick of meetings. Can the man turn his head? Cannot the man turn his head without he have a meeting? He may turn his head, but not to hell. Pray, John, be calm. Mr. Paris, I think you'd best send Reverend Hale back as soon as he come. This will set us all to arguing again in the society, and we thought to have peace this year. I think we ought to rely on the doctor now, and good prayer. Rebecca, the doctor's baffled. If so he is, then let us go to God for the cause of it. There is prodigious danger in the seeking of loose spirits. I fear it. I fear it. Let us rather blame ourselves, and how may we blame ourselves? I am one of 9 sons. The Putnam seed have peopled this province, and yet I have but 1 child left of 8, and now she shrivels. I cannot fathom that. I cannot understand that. Mrs. Putnam says with a growing edge of sarcasm, ha! But I must! You think it God's work that you should never lose a child, nor grandchild either, and I bury all but 1? There are wheels within wheels in this village, and fires within fires. Okay? AKA, there are people out to get us. Putnam then says, when Reverend Hale comes, you will proceed to look for signs of witchcraft here. You cannot command Mr. Paris. You cannot command Mr. Paris. We vote by name in this society, not by acreage. Okay? All of us here matter in the community, and we all have a voice. Not just you, who owns the most amount of land, acreage. But Putnam says, I have never heard you so worried on the society, Mr. Proctor. I do not think I saw you at Sabbath meeting since snow flew. Sabbath meeting, church. I have trouble enough with that I come 5 miles to hear him, Paris, preach only hellfire and bloody damnation. Take it to heart, Mr. Paris. There are many others who stay away from church these days because you hardly ever mention God anymore. Huh! Why, that's a drastic charge. Rebecca, it's somewhat true. There are many that quail to bring their children. I do not preach for children, Rebecca. It is not the children who are unmindful of their obligations toward this ministry. Are there really those unmindful? I should say the better half of Salem village. And more than that, where is my wood? My contract provides I be supplied with all my firewood. I am waiting since November for a stick, and even in November I had to show my frostbitten hands like some London beggar. You are allowed £6 a year to buy your wood, Mr. Paris. I regard that £6 as part of my salary. I am paid little enough without I spend £6 on firewood, 60 plus 6 for firewood. The salary is £66, Mr. Proctor. I am not some preaching farmer with a book under my arm. I am a graduate of Harvard College. Aye, and I am well instructed in arithmetic. Mr. Core, you will look far for a man of my kind at £60 a year. I am not used to this poverty. I left a thrifty business in the Barbados to serve the Lord. I do not fathom it, why I am persecuted here. I cannot offer one proposition, but there be a howling riot of argument. I have often wondered if the devil be in it somewhere. I cannot understand you people otherwise. Mr. Paris, you are the first minister ever did demand the deed to the house. Man, don't a minister deserve a house to live in? Ah, to live in, yes, but to ask ownership is like you shall own the meeting house itself. The last meeting I were at, you spoke so long on deeds and mortgages, I thought it were an auction. Okay, remember, meeting, okay? Meeting house is the church where they do all their business as well. And he says the last meeting, the last time I came to church, you spoke so long about deeds and mortgages, I thought it were an auction instead of a sermon. Okay? And here's the whole thing here about this stupid firewood. Okay? So basically, if you go back, Proctor says he has enough trouble getting to church, which is a 5-mile journey, only to hear Paris preach bloody hellfire and bloody damnation. Okay. Back in the day, one of the practices of many of the Puritan ministers was to scare the crap out of people, telling them they were all going to hell, right? Which the Puritans did believe, but like a lot of these sermons were super, super scary to people, especially children, right? They used a lot of vivid imagery, and one of the big famous ones was written by somebody called Jonathan Edwards, called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And basically, he was saying that you're all sinners. He gave them this image of you are like a spider dangling by a thread over the literal fiery pits of hell. And at any moment, God could decide to drop you down into it, okay? So, of course, people are like, oh, my God, we're all going to die here, right? They were scared. So that's what Proctor is talking about. He's like, I'm tired of hearing about this. And the other thing he's saying is Paris is always in it for himself. Very selfish, very arrogant, and snobby, okay? He's saying, okay, Paris is saying, my salary, what you people pay me is £66, okay? Giles Corey and Proctor are like, no, it's 60, and then you get £6 a year to pay for your firewood, to heat yourself. Like, so think of it like the room part is your rent, the board is like your eating, okay? And so, of course, he's like, I am a Harvard graduate, blah, blah, blah. I am not some backcountry person, okay? So that whole part is showing characterization of him being super arrogant, okay? Then the deed to the house is like the title or the literal piece of paper that shows that you own the house, which, again, Paris is the minister. The town is paying for his salary and allowing him to live there, not to technically own the house, okay? And that's what Proctor is saying. You're the first one who actually wanted the deed to the house, okay? So we're going to go back to page 28, and in the other book, it's on, I want to say, page... it's actually page 30, okay? So Paris is going to say, man, don't a minister deserve a house to live in? So page 30 or page 28, okay? He's arguing. He says, man, don't a minister deserve a house to live in? And Proctor says, to live in, yes, but to ask ownership is like you shall own the meeting house itself. Okay, I already read this part, sorry. The last meeting I were at, you spoke so long on deeds and mortgages, I thought it were an auction. I want a mark of confidence is all. I am your third preacher in 7 years. I do not wish to be put out like the cat whenever some majority feels the whim. You people seem not to comprehend that a minister is the Lord's man in the parish. A minister is not to be so lightly crossed and contradicted. Aye. There is either obedience in the church. There is either obedience, or the church will burn like hell is burning. You all must be obedient to me. because I am the instrument of God. Again, super arrogant. Then Proctor says, can you speak 1 minute without we land in hell again? I am sick of hell. It is not to say what is good for you to hear. I may speak my heart, I think. Paris says, what are we, Quakers? We're not Quakers here yet, Mr. Proctor, and you may tell that to your followers. Okay, Quakers were a different type of religious sect, okay? And they were a lot more open, and they followed science a lot more. They were definitely a lot less harsh than the Puritans, okay? So Paris says, you can tell that to your followers. And Paris says, my followers? Paris says, oh, there is a party in this church. A group. A party is a group. I am not blind. There is a faction and a party against you, against him in all authority. Huh, well, then I must find it and join it. So Proctor's like making the joke. There is shock among the others. He does not mean that. He confessed it now. I mean it sullenly, Rebecca. I like not the smell of his authority. No, you cannot break charity with your minister. You are another kind, John. Clasp his hand, make your peace, forgive him. Stop arguing. I have a crop to sow and lumber to drag home. Okay? He goes angrily out the door and turns to Giles with a smile. What say you, Giles? Let's find the party. He says there's a party. I've changed my opinion of this man, John. Mr. Paris, I beg your pardon. I never thought you had so much iron in you. Why, thank you, Giles. It suggests to the mind what the trouble be among us all these years. Think on it. Wherefore is everybody suing everybody else? Think on it. It's a deep thing, and dark as a pit. I've been 6 times in court this year. Hey, I've gone to court 6 times. Proctor then it says, so he's kind of joking with me, is it the devil's fault that a man cannot say you good morning, cannot say good morning to you, without you clap him for defamation? Sue him for defamation. You're old, Giles, and you're not hearing so well as you did. John Proctor, I have only last month collected £4 damages for you publicly saying I burned the roof off your house, and I never said no such thing, but I've paid you for it, so I hope I can call you deaf without charge. Now come along, Giles, and help me drag my lumber home. A moment, Mr. Proctor. What lumber is that you're dragging, if I may ask you? My lumber. From out my forest by the riverside. Ha ha! Well, we are surely gone wild this year. What anarchy is this? That tract, that piece of land, is in my bounds. It's in my bounds, Mr. Proctor. In your bounds? I bought that tract from Goody Nurse's husband 5 months ago. Well, he had no right to sell it. It stands clear in my grandfather's will that all the land between the river and your grandfather had a habit of willing land that never belonged to him, if I may say it plain. That's the God's truth. He nearly willed away my north pasture, but he knew I'd break his fingers before he'd set his name to it. Let's get your lumber home, John. I feel a sudden will to work coming on. You load 1 oak of mine, and you'll fight to drag it home. Aye, and we'll win too, Putnam, this fool and I. Come on. I'll have my men on you, Corey. I'll clap a writ on you. A writ is like a court order, okay? I'll charge you. Enter Reverend John Hale of Beverly. So now we have a new character. You need to annotate here, Reverend Hale is the witchcraft expert, okay? Mr. Hale is nearing 40. So we've got characterization here. A tight-skinned, eager-eyed intellectual. This is a beloved errand or task for him. On being called here to ascertain or figure out witchcraft, he felt the pride of a specialist whose unique knowledge has at last been publicly called for. Like almost all men of learning, he has spent a good deal of his time pondering the invisible world, right? The ghostly world, especially since he had himself encountered a witch in his parish not long before. That woman, however, turned into a mere pest under his searching scrutiny, and the child she had allegedly been afflicting recovered her normal behavior after Hale had given her his kindness and a few days of rest in his own house, right? So there was no witch. However, that experience never raised a doubt in his mind as to the reality of the underworld or hell, or the existence of Lucifer's, okay, Lucifer's another name for Satan, of Lucifer's many-faced lieutenants, and his belief is not to his discredit. Better mind than Hale's were and still are, convinced that there is a society of spirits beyond our ken, K-E-N, our know. One cannot help noting that one of his lines has never yet raised a laugh in any audience that has seen this play. It is his assurance that, quote, we cannot look to superstition in this. The devil is precise or exact. Evidently, we are not quite certain even now whether diabolism is, which is like devil, the practice of the devil, is holy and not to be scoffed at. And it is no accident that we should be so bemused. Vocab word, confused. Like Reverend Hale and the others on this stage, we conceive the devil as a necessary part of the respectable view of cosmology. Cosmology is the study of how the whole cosmos or the universe was created. So basically he's saying that without God, there can be no devil. Without the devil, there can be no God. And basically he just talks about that for the rest of this part here. We are going to skip over all of this stuff, okay? And he talks about over all of these pages, and he relates it to the fact that because we believe that there are things that are not communist, there have to be communists. Or if there are communists, there has to not be communists. So because remember, this play was written in the 50s. And at the time, there was this big red scare, and they were afraid of what was going to happen. And so Joseph McCarthy, the senator, basically had this witch hunt. And again, this whole book is in response to Joseph McCarthy accusing Arthur Miller of being a communist without any evidence. Okay, and a lot of other artists like Charlie Chaplin and Langston Hughes, those actors and artists. So we're, though, going to skip all the way to where it says coming into Salem now, okay? So in this book, it's on page 34 because we're not going to listen to Miller's commentary because he rambles on again, okay? So page 34 in the fat book, and it is page 36 in the skinny book, okay? 36 in the skinny book, last paragraph where it says coming into Salem now, because we're learning more about Reverend Hale's, okay? Right in the middle of the page in the skinny book, towards the top of the page in the fat book. So it says, coming into Salem now, Reverend Hale conceives or believes of himself much as a young doctor on his first call. His painfully acquired armory of symptoms, catchwords, and diagnostic procedures is now to be put to use at last. The road from Beverly is unusually busy this morning, and he has passed 100 rumors that make him smile at the ignorance of the yeomanry, Y-E-O-M-A-N-R-Y. Yeomanry would be like the peasant folk or the farmers. Okay, so he's like, oh, they're all saying these rumors. I'm smiling at how ignorant they are, and they don't know anything of science. Okay, so they make him smile at the ignorance of the yeomanry in this most precise science. He, Reverend Hale, feels himself allied with the best minds of Europe, kings, philosophers, scientists, and ecclesiasts, all of all churches, ecclesiasts, religious specialists. His goal is light, goodness, and its preservation, and he knows the exaltation of the blessed whose intelligence, sharpened by minute examinations of enormous tracts, is finally called upon to face what may be a bloody fight with the fiend himself. The fiend with the capital S is the devil. He appears loaded down with half a dozen heavy books. Remember, heavy, guys, we also spoke a little bit about another motif here, is the weight motif, okay, about how heavy things are. So he comes in with these books and he says, oh, pray you, someone take these. Oh, Mr. Hale, oh, it's good to see you again. Oh, my, they're heavy. They must be. They are weighted with authority. All right, that's important there. Well, you do come prepared. We shall need hard study if it comes to tracking down the old boy. Again, the old boy is another name for devil. He turns to Rebecca. You cannot be Rebecca, nurse. I am, sir. Do you know me? It's strange how I knew you, but I suppose you look as such a good soul should. We have all heard of your great charities in Beverly. Do you know this gentleman, Mr. Thomas Putnam, and his good wife, Anne? Putnam, I had not expected such distinguished company, sir. It does not seem to help us today, Mr. Hale. We look to you to come to our house and save our child. Your child ails too. Her soul seems flown away. She sleeps, and yet she walks. She cannot eat. Cannot eat. Do you men have afflicted children? No, these are farmers. John Proctor, he don't believe in witches. I never spoke on witches, one way or the other. Will you come on, Giles? No, John, I think not. I have some few queer questions of my own to ask this fellow. I've heard you to be a sensible man, Mr. Hale. I hope you'll leave some of it in Salem. Now, this is important here. He's saying, I hope you leave some good sense, some common sense in Salem, because John Proctor's like, these people are not thinking with common sense. Proctor goes out. Hale stands embarrassed for an instant. Paris then says, will you look at my daughter, sir? She has tried to leap out of the window. We discovered her this morning on the high road, waving her arms as though she'd fly. Tries to fly. She cannot bear to hear the Lord's name, Mr. Hale. That's a sure sign of witchcraft afloat. No. Now let me instruct you. We cannot look to superstition in this. The devil is precise. The marks of his presence are definite as stone. And I must tell you all that I shall not proceed unless you are prepared to believe me, if I should find no bruise of hell upon her. It is agreed, sir. It is agreed. We will abide by your judgment. Good then. Now, sir, what were your first warning of this strangeness? Why, sir, I discovered her, he points at Abigail, and my niece, 10 or 12 of the other girls, dancing in the forest last night. You permit dancing? No, it were secret. Mr. Paris's slave has knowledge of conjuring, sir. Paris then says, we cannot be sure of that, Goody Anne. I know it, sir. I sent my child. She should learn from Tituba, who murdered her sisters. Oh, Goody Anne, you sent a child to conjure up the dead? Let God blame me, not you, Rebecca. I'll not have you judging me any more. Is it a natural work to lose 7 children before they live a day? She says to Mr. Hale. Shh! Rebecca then, with great pain, turns her face away, and there is a pause. 7 dead in childbirth. Her voice breaks. She looks up at him. Hale is impressed. And Paris then looks to him, and he goes to his books, opened one, and turns the pages and reads, and all wait heavily, so everyone's staring. Paris says, what book is that? What's there, sir? Hale. Here is all the invisible world caught, defined, and calculated. In these books the devil stands stripped of all his brute disguises. Here are all your familiar spirits, your incubi and succubi, your witches that go by land, by air, and by sea, your wizards of the night and of the day. Have no fear now, we shall find him out if he has come among us, and I mean to crush him utterly if he has shown his face. Will it hurt the child, sir? I cannot tell. If she is truly in the devil's grip, we may have to rip and tear her free. I think I'll go, then. I am too old for this. Why, Rebecca, we may open up the boil of all our troubles today. We must discover what's going on. She says, let us hope for that. I go to God for you, sir. I pray for you. I hope you do not mean we go to Satan here. I wish I knew. And she goes out, and they feel resentful of her note of moral superiority. Putnam says, come, Mr. Hale, let's get on. Sit you here. Mr. Hale, says Giles, I have always wanted to ask a learned man what signifies or what means the reading of strange books. What books? I cannot tell. She hides them. Who does this? Martha, my wife. I have waked at night many a time and found her in a corner, reading of a book. And now what do you make of that? Why, that's not necessarily. It discomfits me. It confuses and frustrates me. Last night, mark this, I tried and could not say my prayers. I tried to pray, but I couldn't remember the words. And then she closes her book and walks out of the house, and suddenly, mark this, I could pray again. I remembered my prayers. And then here comes Miller with his commentary, old Giles must be spoken for, if only because his fate was to be so remarkable and so different from that of all the others. He was in his early 80s at this time, and was the most comical or funny hero in the history. Again, so we should annotate this as characterization of Giles. No man has ever been blamed for so much. If a cow was missed, the first thing thought was to look for her around Corey's house. A fire blazing up at night brought suspicion of arson to his door. He didn't give a hoot for public opinion, so didn't care what anybody thought about him. And only in his last years, after he had married Martha, did he bother much with the church. That she stopped his prayer or made him forget his words praying is very probable, but he forgot to say that he'd only recently learned any prayers, and it didn't take much to make him stumble over them. He was a crank and a nuisance, okay? Kind of a goofball and a pain in the butt, but withal a deeply innocent and brave man. In court once, he was asked if it were true that he had been frightened by the strange behavior of a hog, and had then said he knew it to be the devil in an animal shape. What frightened you? He was asked. He forgot everything but the word frighted, and instantly replied, I do not know that I ever spoke that word in my life. So just goofy. Hale then goes back to this, says, the stoppage of prayer. That is strange. I'll speak further on that with you. I'm not saying she's touched the devil, Nell, but I'd admire to know what books she reads and why she hides them. She'll not answer me, you see. I will discuss it. And then he says to everybody, now, mark me. If the devil is in her, you will witness some frightful wonders in this room. So please to keep your wits about you. Mr. Putnam, stand close in case she flies. Now he speaks directly. Now, Betty, dear, will you sit up? Can you hear me? I am John Hale, minister of Beverly. I have come to help you, dear. Do you remember my 2 little girls in Beverly? Oh, how can it be the devil? Why would he choose my house to strike? We have all manner of licentious people in the village. Licentious is sinful, okay? What victory would the devil have to win a soul already bad? It is the best the devil wants, and who is better than the minister? Aye, that's deep, Mr. Paris, deep, deep. So, basically, Paris says, okay, why does he come to my house, right? We have all kinds of sinners and licentious or lying, sinful people. Why would he choose my house? And Hale says, oh, but it's the best that the devil wants, right? And he assumes that you, being a minister, would have a very good soul. Now Hale, or Paris says, Betty, answer Mr. Hale, Betty. Hale says to Betty, does someone afflict you, child? Afflict, does someone, like, torture you or, have witchcraft on you? It need not be a woman, mind you, or a man. Perhaps some bird invisible to others comes to you. Perhaps a pig, a mouse, or any beast at all. Is there some figure bids you fly? The child remains limp in his hands, and in silence he lays her back on the pillow. Now holding his hands towards her, he intones, In nomine Domini sabot suo filiac et infernos, which is all Latin. She doesn't stir, and he turns to Abigail, his eyes narrowing. Abigail, what sort of dancing were you doing with her in the forest? Why, common dancing is all. I think I ought to say that I saw a kettle in the grass where they were dancing. Well, that were only soup. What sort of soup were in this kettle, Abigail? Oh, why, it were beans and lentils, I think, and... Mr. Paris, did you not notice, did you? Or you did not notice, did you, any living thing in the kettle? A mouse, perhaps, a spider, a frog? I do believe that there was some movement in the soup. That jumped in. We never put it in. What jumped in? Why, a very little frog jumped. A frog, Abby! And then Hale grasps her and says, Abigail, it may be your cousin is dying. Did you call the devil last night? I never called him. Tituba, Tituba. Paris blanched, which means he turns white, remember? She called the devil. I should like to speak with Tituba. Goody Ann, will you bring her up? How did she call him? I know not. She spoke Barbados. Did you feel any strangeness when she called him? A sudden cold wind, perhaps, a trembling below the ground. I didn't see no devil. Betty, wake up, Betty, Betty! You cannot evade me, Abigail. Did your cousin drink any of the brew in that kettle? She never drank it. Did you drink it? No, sir. Did Tituba ask you to drink it? She tried, but I refused. Why are you concealing? Have you sold yourself to Lucifer? I never sold myself. I'm a good girl. I'm a proper girl. Now Mrs. Putnam enters with Tituba, and instantly Abigail points at Tituba. She made me do it. She made Betty do it. Abby, Tituba says. She makes me drink blood. Blood? My baby's blood? No, chicken blood. I give she chicken blood. Woman, have you enlisted these children for the devil? No, sir, I don't truck with no devil. Why cannot she wake? Are you silencing this child? I love me, Betty. Have you sent your spirit out upon this child? Have you not? Or you have sent your spirit out upon this child, have you not? Are you gathering souls for the devil? And then Abigail says, she sends her spirit on me in church. She makes me laugh at prayer. Oh, she have often laughed at prayer. She comes to me every night to go and drink blood. You beg me to conjure. She begged me make charm. Don't lie. She comes to me while I sleep. She's always making me dream corruptions, like bad things. Why you say that, Abby? Sometimes I wake and I find myself standing in the open doorway and not a stitch on my body. I always hear her laughing in my sleep. I hear her singing her Barbados songs and tempting me with, Mr. Reverend, I never. Tituba, I want you to wake this child. I have no power on this child, sir. You most certainly do, and you will free her from it now. Why did you compact with the devil? Compact means make a deal. I don't compact with no devil. You will confess yourself, or I will take you out and whip you to your death, Tituba. This woman must be hanged. She must be taken and hanged. Tituba now says, No, don't hang Tituba. I tell him I don't desire to work for him, sir. The devil? Then you saw him. Tituba is now weeping, and Hale says, Now, Tituba, I know that when we bind ourselves to hell, it is very hard to break with it. We are going to help you. Tear yourself free. Tituba, frightened by the process, now says, Oh, Mr. Reverend, I do believe somebody else bewitching these children. Okay, so she's changing her story. Says, No, I don't do anything. I haven't done anything. But when they threaten to whip her and hang her, she confesses to being a witch and seeing the devil, okay? So Tituba again says, Mr. Reverend, I do believe somebody be else witching these children. Who? I don't know, sir, but the devil got him numerous witches. Does he? Tituba, look into my eyes. Come, look into me. You would be a good Christian woman, would you not, Tituba? Aye, sir, a good Christian woman. And you love these little children? Oh, yes, sir, I don't desire to hurt little children. And you love God, Tituba? I love God with all my being. Now in God's holy name, oh, bless him, and to his glory, oh, eternal glory, bless him, Open yourself, Tituba, open yourself and let God's holy light shine on you. And she said, oh, bless the Lord. When the devil comes to you, does he ever come with another person? Perhaps another person in the village, someone you know? Who came with him? Sarah Good. Did you ever see Sarah Good with him? Or Osborne? Was it a man or a woman came with him? Man or woman? Was woman. What woman? A woman, you said. What woman? It was black dark, and you could see him. Why could you not see her? Oh, well, they was always talking, and they was always running round and carrying on. You mean out of Salem? Salem witches? I believe, sir. Yes, sir. Tituba, as Reverend Hale says, you must have no fear to tell us who they are. Do you understand? We will protect you. The devil can never overcome a minister. You know that, do you not? Aye, sir. Oh, I do. You have confessed yourself to witchcraft, and that speaks a wish to come to heaven's side. And we will bless you, Tituba. Oh, God bless you, Mr. Hale. Now, Hale says, you are God's instrument, put in our hands to discover the devil's agents among us. You are selected, Tituba. You are chosen to help us cleanse our village. So speak utterly, Tituba. Turn your back on him and face God. Face God, Tituba, and God will protect you. Oh, God, protect Tituba. Who came with you to the devil? 2, 3, 4? How many? Tituba pants and begins rocking back and forth and staring ahead, okay? So she's freaking out, but she figures out what's going on here, okay? There was 4. There was 4. Who? Their names, right? They want a name of somebody. They want someone to blame. Tituba then says, oh, how many times he bid me kill you, Mr. Paris. Kill me? He say, Mr. Paris must be killed. Mr. Paris no goodly man. Mr. Paris mean man and no gentleman. And he bid me rise out of my bed and cut your throat. But I tell him, no, I don't hate that man. I don't want kill that man. But he say, you work for me, Tituba, and I make you free. I give you pretty dress to wear and put you way up high on the air, and you go fly back to Barbados. And I say, you lie, devil, you lie. And then he come one stormy night to me, and he say, look, I have white people belong to me. And I say, and I look, and there was Goody Good, Sarah Good. Hi, sir, and Goody Osborne. I knew it. Goody Osborne were midwife to me 3 times. I begged you, Thomas, did I not? I begged him not to call Osborne because I feared them. My baby's always shriveled in her hands. Now take courage. You must give us all their names. How can you bear to see this child suffering? Look at her, Tituba. Look at her God-given innocence. Her soul is so tender, we must protect her, Tituba. The devil is out and preying on her like a beast upon the flesh of the pure lamb. God will bless you for your help. Now Abigail rises, staring as though inspired, and cries out. So Abigail's figured out what's going on. If Tituba confesses and gives them a name of a witch, someone she saw with the devil, because she's already thrown out Goody Osborne and Goody Good, Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, right? Now they're saying, oh my God, you're God's instrument. You're here to help us, right? So Tituba saves herself. So Abigail catches on. It says, Abigail rises, staring as though inspired, and cries out, and she says, I want to open myself. I want the light of God. I want the sweet love of Jesus. I dance for the devil. I saw him. I wrote in his book. I go back to Jesus. I kiss his hand. I saw Sarah Good with the devil. I saw Goody Osborne with the devil. I saw Bridget Bishop with the devil. As she is speaking, Betty is rising from the bed, a fever in her eyes, and picks up the chant. Betty now says, I saw George Jacobs with the devil. I saw Goody Howe with the devil. Oh, she speaks, Paris says. She speaks. Oh, glory to God, it is broken. They are free. Betty, I saw Martha Bellows with the devil. I saw Goody Cibber with the devil. Putnam, the marshal. I'll call the marshal, because they're going to arrest all these people. The marshal's the police. Okay, Betty. I saw Alice Barrow. Betty says, I saw Alice Barrow with the devil. And the curtain begins to fall. And Hale says, let the marshal bring the irons, the chains. Then Abigail says, I saw Goody Hawkins with the devil. I saw Goody Bibber with the devil. I saw Goody Booth with the devil. And then the curtain falls as they're screaming out all these names of people who are now going to be accused of witchcraft. And that is where Act 1 ends.